Hello and welcome to the Westcity Church podcast. If you'd like to get to know us more, find us at westcitychurch.com.au. We really hope that you're encouraged by today's message.
We haven't met before. I'm Jordy. And I haven't been here in a while for various reasons, which, look at me trying to justify myself to all of you. I've been struggling with inadequacy a lot over the last couple of months. When I hold up the mirror in each area of my life, I don't really love what I see. I'm struck by the chasm between who I think I should be and who I really am. I feel inadequate in my spirituality. I honestly can't remember the last time I was intentional about reading the Bible or spending time with God. An inadequate friend, sister, daughter, not putting in the effort to make time for those I say I love. Inadequate as a trainee psychologist. I'm not as present and empathetic as I feel that my peers deserve me to be when we do our role plays. And then I wonder if that will make me inadequate as a future psychologist. I feel inadequate as I look at the state of our world and feel I am doing nothing to help the state of affairs. Inadequate in my body, in my discipline, inadequately prepared as I speak this morning, as I did this in the car on the way here and late at night. And it's with that desperate sense of inadequacy that I'm returning to the table today. When I take the bread and the wine, all of my not enoughness is met with fulfillment in Christ. I don't always know what that means, but today I know that I need Jesus. The other thing about feeling inadequate is that it can feel profoundly isolating. It's hard to be in relationship with others while I'm trying to keep them at arm's length, lest they see the ugly ways in which I'm failing and falling short. But when I come to the table, I'm not alone. At Westcity, we serve communion to one another, and I'm not great with eye contact. It feels uncomfortable. But when I look another human being in the eye, despite my inner state, that wedge I've driven between myself and everybody else begins to buckle. So when we partake in communion together today, I want to challenge us to take the risk, allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and to look each other in the eye and allow ourselves to be seen by one another.
So if we haven't met, my name's Tara and I'm part of the teaching team here, and I have the privilege of sharing today on Palm Sunday, which is a weird occurrence that, like, in the last 10 years, and I haven't always preached that often, but no matter how little or how often I am rostered, I always end up preaching Palm Sunday, which I'm okay with because I feel like I, for a change, would be quite prepared, except for this Sunday we have a series, so, I'm kind of working with something a little bit different. But it is going to be a Palm Sunday tinted I am statement, and if that's out of sync with the series, it's okay because John started it, because the whole passage is actually started in Palm Sunday. So the passage that I'm working with today is John 14 verse 6, where Jesus says to his disciples, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." I'm going to read a little bit more of the passage a little bit later on. But before we get too deep into that, I'm going to give you a little bit of a lesson in communication, if that's okay. Because I have done this particular kind of topic a few times, I thought I'd give you a little bit of the background information. Is that okay? So I have done a bit of time working with communicators. It's something that I really enjoy. And I learnt as I was working out how to share what works and what doesn't when you're speaking to a group of people, or, holding them hostage and forcing them to listen to you, that if you want to say something challenging or controversial even, you have to be wise about how you do it. We are notoriously bad at receiving new information. Humans are just wired that way. Our confirmation bias is probably one of the strongest biases we have. actually, I would say violently resistant sometimes. Psychological studies have shown that if you map the activity in the brain when someone is presented with information that directly challenges a belief that they hold that's important to them, that the brain reacts as though someone is coming at them with a physical, weapon. It's the same, looks the same. And if you've ever come across information that challenges something that you thought to be true, you'll probably know that you feel a little bit like that. And so what happens when someone hears something that makes them feel like that, they're not always so set up to accept, learn, or rethink their previously held, ideas about things. Now, this obviously is somewhat new science, the brain mapping and stuff, but it's obviously old wisdom because it appears that God kind of knew this from the start. So the Bible has a really solid pattern of doing this well, or better than we often do it. We are, on the flip side, very good at, maybe designed even, to put pieces together. So when we are given a story or when we're given a piece of a story, we use other stories that we know to figure out where that piece fits. We are storytelling beings. We are creatures that have a story, need to be in a story, and are designed to know our bigger story. And that's why we get so lost when we don't know where we fit. It's why I think sometimes in our modern society that's hyper-individualized, that young people struggle to know who they are because they don't know where they fit. We are especially good at using those stories that we already know to fill gaps when when we get partial pictures. And sometimes that leads us to interesting conclusions because, we kind of force what we already know to fit with something new, and it gives us some weird conclusions, and you might see a little bit of that going on around about today. But in a lot of cases, having a story helps us to rightly place something where it belongs. Good communicators will usually do one of two things. They'll either answer a question that you're already asking, or they will use a story that you already know or resonate with to make you question something that you thought you knew. A really good communicator will bring both of those things together and help the listener become a learner, figure things out on their own, place the pieces where they fit, work it out. Have you ever sat listening to someone and you're like halfway through what they're telling you about and you're like, oh, I never saw that. They haven't even said it yet, but you figured it out. And actually, we're much more likely to remember or receive that information. And it turns out that John's Gospel is a prime example of how Jesus understood the assignment on this. Not only does the way Jesus shows who he is demonstrate the whole show, don't tell literary technique, but he also, time and time again, takes something that is known and familiar or even expected and uses that story to help the people listening figure something brand new out. So I say all of that because we're going to open up this text as one example of how Jesus is doing that, because without that understanding, sometimes this text especially can lead us in some interesting directions. The part that is usually read when we refer to this verse is Jesus said to him, actually he's speaking to one person, but that's a side note, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, some part of me at some part of my life really liked the certainty in that verse. So much so that I have it tattooed quite large on my right leg, which makes for interesting conversations because I'm probably not that certain about anything these days. And so I'm not going to say regrets, but it has some explaining when I'm out in summer. I think now we look around and a lot of Christians, a lot of us would like that kind of certainty. Lean into that kind of being sure about something that is exact and true and right, and this is how it is, and this is how we should be. But I think the flip side to that is that we have enough superiority and self-importance in our modern culture that has become a almost weaponized or toxic kind of way of reflecting on who it is that Jesus is saying he is and who it is that he's calling us to be. When we take these words that were meant to step into someone's story and open it up and use them to put God in a box that we can be sure we can keep him in, or even more, a box that we're sure that we can keep others out of, it becomes something that I don't think Jesus ever meant it to be. At the risk of sounding like ChatGPT, it really isn't that, it's this. And I'm going to show you, but if you want to look, my notes are all handwritten, so I swear, not ChatGPT. None of the I am statements actually are really statements on their own. If I'm looking at all of them in their context, they are much more responses than they are statements. They are often directly answers to questions. And so it's helpful to look at the questions that's being asked so that when we look at the answer, we know a little bit more about what Jesus was trying to say. So if you look at this particular I am statement, you'll notice that it begins, it doesn't begin, it is part of a conversation that begins 2 chapters earlier. It's the last conversation Jesus has with the disciples before he goes to the cross. It's at the Last Supper, and some things unfold, and then Jesus shares what I can only assume, given they're the last words he shares with the disciples at this point, some very important things he has to say to them. So if we flip back all the way to chapter 12, where it starts, I'm just going to give you a little bit of context and a little bit of insight into how my brain works. As I was writing down short notes to summarize all of these chapters, I started hearing it in my mind like Jimmy Fallon does the Trump summary on his show. Have you ever heard him do that, where he's like trying to get through a lot of stuff and he puts... Sorry, but you're getting that. And I would have liked to put some images to it, but I am much less organised than I would like to be. So I have words only. But we start in John chapter 12. A donkey, Hosanna. Some Greeks want to see Jesus. Death is foreshadowed. He departs from believers. 13, basin, towel, dirty toes. Teacher kneels, takes off robe. Broken bread, betrayer he knows, love one another. Where will you go? Peter is ambitious, now he's weary of crows. 14, same speech, same day, dwelling place, know the way. Verse 5, questions, 7 answers. Philip, still not satisfied, questions, answers. Promised spirit will abide. Verse 9, questions, end of time. I leave you peace and promised life. So that's 3 chapters of Bible. And I can't get sidetracked when I'm doing that, so that's also helpful. But if you missed it because it was weird to listen to, they are asking, what is the way to life? So there's a question. The whole conversation is an answer to a question: what is the way, and what are the true commands, and how do we obtain life? And Jesus does some show and tell. We know that he starts by washing the disciples' feet. And I don't think that's the opening scene to this conversation for no reason. When it comes to these big statements, the I am statements, they're often drawing on so much imagery and understanding and cultural, maybe baggage would be the right word, that we can't come to it without looking at what they were actually meaning when they said the way. What were they meaning when they asking, how will we know the way? What images came to mind? Like the light from Exodus or the shepherd from Ezekiel. In this I am statement, Jesus is drawing on their traditions as well, the things that they remembered and knew. And this particular one, we know Jesus draws from 3 pilgrimage festivals. 3 main events that happened annually that the people in his hearing would have understood, that they would have repeated from the time they were small, and it's by the time they're listening to him is so etched in their common understanding that it is just one of those things that he doesn't even have to say he's referring to. They know he's referring to it. So these 3 festivals, and I'm going to give you a few of the pieces here and not the whole picture, but these 3 festivals, Passover remembers the way out of Egypt. Remembers the way that that God led them out of Egypt. So they are speaking about a way. In Shavuot, the remembering or receiving of the Torah, the truth or the word, as they understood it at that time, was celebrated. So they're speaking about what is God's final word, what is God's statement to us, what is God's truth. And so in that festival, they would celebrate that. And in Sukkot, the tabernacles or the tents, or so many different ways we translate it, they remembered the place God dwelled with them in the wilderness, the safety and provision that was given to them on the way to the promised land, the way that God was present with the people. The giver of life, the way he sustained life. And so we have 3 festivals: way, truth, and life. The people Jesus is speaking to have a built-in story map, like we all do as well. And so sometimes when we read these words, we don't hear them the same way Jesus would have intended them. We hear them through our own filter. And maybe the way someone told you to do something, maybe the only way, has its own kind of baggage for you. And maybe what is truth has its own kind of baggage for you because of the way what is right and true was reflected to you. And maybe what life means for you. And I know for a lot of us, we've kind of been taught to assume life begins after death. But we're hearing from a God who stepped into creation, stepped into our reality. And if everything important was that side of eternity, then why would he begin speaking about life and giving us an example of life and showing us the way to life in this one? But we come with our own kind of baggage and understanding, and so sometimes we read it and hear something that wasn't in the text. Or maybe we limit it to something because of the box that we were taught to put God in. See, I don't think Jesus speaks these words to the disciples to introduce a way. He comes to tell him that he is the way. He comes knowing that they are asking and have been expecting. See, the way the Jewish people remembered was not only backwards but forwards. It was always about what God had done, but what God was going to do. They remembered the way he led them out of Egypt because it demonstrated how God would one day lead them into a more full, the promised land in a different sense. And so Jesus steps into that and speaks into that and says, that way that you saw God do and are waiting for God to do, I am. He doesn't come to give them a list of religious instructions. Actually, he came and upended all of that. They already had all of that. When they ask what's the greatest command, he says, what? Love one another. It's in the same conversation. When they say, how will we know? He says, I am the truth. So he shows and then he tells. He shows them what that looks like in action when he kneels and washes the disciples' feet. He shows them what that looks like in action when he rides into Jerusalem on a donkey instead of a war horse. He shows them, is about to show them what that looks like when he lays down his own life for those he loves. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. But he's already shown them exactly what that means. We cannot separate the disciples' experience of Jesus from the teaching and instruction he gave for them to follow. And we get in trouble when we do. We make our belief system, our understanding, our way, because we've put the label Christianity or Jesus on top of that, and we call that the way, and then tell people that that is the only way. But Jesus said, I am the way. He shows them by demonstrating that the love that he lives in every facet of his life, right up to the point of death and resurrection, that is the way. I wonder what we're waiting for, what our framework might be. If Jesus were to walk in here, into a room full of disciples, what is it that our common language or cultural context or maybe our own personal story, what is it that shapes the things we remember and the things that we wait for? Maybe for some people it's, the great Australian dream that, I'm going to get a good job and I'm going to be able to own a house and I'm going to raise my kids in that house and, I'm going to have grandkids who are that whole picture of success in life. Maybe it is success itself. Maybe it's being the best at the, or obtaining some level of something in your professional life or in some other area that you value. Maybe it's just as simple as the good life, success, security. What is it that we collectively and individually are waiting for? That if Jesus were here today and said, I am, it would completely upend, but also give you great joy to know that God says, what you're waiting for, you are enough because I am. You have enough because I am. You have hope for a good life because I am. There are answers to the things that feel unjust in the world because God is good. I am. Like, what would God step into in your life and say, I am? This week, as we go out into our world, as we walk through this Holy Week, consider how God might be answering that question in your life. This is what we talk about when we wait in Advent, when we search through Lent, when we lean into trusting God. This is the thing that God is speaking to every one of us and all of us. Say, I am who I am. And whatever else you're waiting for, this is enough. How would that change your perspective going forward? How would that change our worship, how we come together, how we come to the table? The challenge today is, can we confess the ways that we would rather put God in a neat little box than let him speak I am to questions that are bigger than any box we can create. Next week, as we go into talking about the death and resurrection of Jesus, how will we let that speak into all that is missing and not right in this life? How will we let the I am, how will we let the way, the truth and the life be a revelation to us? I'm going to ask the team to come and join me as we get ready to come around the table. Sometimes I feel like it's too hard looking out at the world, at the lives of people I know, the things they're going through, to just go, well, God said it, he is enough, there is an answer. Like, it feels a bit glib. But we're not just talking about a God who said that from a distance. This is the God that we see in these Gospels that stepped into our world, into our reality, and walks it through with us. And so it might not be complete this side of eternity, but we start here remembering that it's through Jesus' death and resurrection that we can even imagine the kind of hope and good news that God speaks of. And in a very practical sense, so often we find the beginnings of that journey with the people that we meet around the table, figuratively here or at our own tables at home. And so as you come to receive communion this morning, no matter how distant that hope feels, remember that God meets us here with each other. He met us here when he was present to the world in the form of Jesus, and he'll meet you on the way because he is the way.
Thank you so much for joining us. Each week at West City, we say a benediction together. We do this because we believe that the purpose of the church is to be a caring community for the world, and that as we go and serve others, we enter into Christ's work of welcome, restoration and healing, both for us and others. We believe that in doing so, we get to see and encounter Christ. So let's say the benediction together. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So we will go out and feed the hungry, go out and clothe the naked, go out and fight for justice, go out and end oppression, go out and proclaim anew the old story, go out and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, and don't even like us. And we'll do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.